Smart strategy, real conversations, bigger margins. This is Chasing the Margin podcast.
Welcome back to Chasing the Margin. Today we have another returning guest, Mr. Marcel Brunel. Marcel, thanks for joining us again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
So Marcel, just give us a little recap of like who you are, what you do, just brief recap for those who haven't seen the first episode.
You bet. About 4 years ago, I started a company, co-founded a company with Dan Newby called Dignity Inc. And the only reason we started this company was to normalize emotions. And we are now on a journey around emotional regulation and how that plays a big role in decision-making, problem-solving, relationship building. So I do a lot of work with first responders. I just got back yesterday from Washington, D.C., working with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And I do a lot of work on the policing side as well. Many of the practitioners around the world who take our approach do it with teachers, work inside cultures. So it's starting to really grow, and very grateful to be here.
Awesome. How was it in Washington, D.C.? How did that go?
Well, when you walk around, you do see National Guard. So it does look a little bit like, wow, martial law might be kicking in over here. Very clean, and yet the work was specifically focused on what they would call fellows. And so fellows are fire chiefs from all over the country who come to Washington, D.C. to meet with senators. And when they meet with the senators, they need to have two things happen. Have something to say and say it well. And so when you're trying to get a specific cancer into a bill to be put on a healthcare policy so a firefighter can be covered because a different carcinogen has been discovered, that's kind of the role that they play in influencing, but they also are advocates in the quality of life of a firefighter and the adaptability and the sustainability of a firefighter.
So were you there kind of to help coach these guys on how to express what they're trying to say? Was that your role in all of that?
My role was on have something to say and have your story be tied to an emotion. So when you make a decision, sure, there's an aspect of logic. There's a huge aspect of emotion. And so when you're trying to influence somebody in the way that they think or the way that they vote, there is a sense of content around here's what the bill is about, but the emotion, the story can be the difference that makes the difference.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, being in my field, I think that I relate to that even more because CPAs a lot of times are known to be smart individuals, but they don't communicate well, mainly because they come off as maybe a little stale and not very emotional. And I think that, as you know, the founder of our firm, Annie, is a little more emotional than people say most CPAs are. And I think that builds a certain level of trust when it feels like you know what you're saying and understand a subject matter a little more when you're able to put the emotion and the story behind all of the facts and circumstances of whatever you're trying to communicate.
I agree. And so during breaks, sometimes you'll have a firefighter or a police officer walk up to me and say, "Are you asking me to be more emotional?" And the answer is no. And then someone will say, "Are you asking me to be emotionless?" And the answer is no. What I am asking you to be is more emotionally regulated. Are you able to be in choice to select the emotions needed and necessary for the situation at hand? And people are like, well, isn't rage a bad emotion? No, it's not. Not at all. Especially if you had a weapon and somebody takes it away from you and now, you know what? I got to win at all cost. Rage can be very helpful. So it's really around emotional regulation.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, glad to hear that things are going well. We're going to talk about all kinds of things that have changed. I went and listened to our first episode, and I think several things have come to fruition since the last time we spoke. So I want to hear about those things. And I think the biggest thing today, which I think you'll be okay with, is I wanted to dive into a lot of things that have all kinds of emotions around it in today's day and age. I think that you probably deal with it talking with these firefighters and police officers in their field. And then, there's just all kinds of subjects around it. So we'll just jump right into it. But I wanted to start off, the last time we talked, you said the emotional regulation dashboard assessment was coming out. So I believe that's come out because I checked the website. It looked like it was on there. How is that going?
You, my friend, have a very good memory. So just as of this morning, I was on a Zoom call at 3:30 Texas time, 3:30 a.m., and we now have been able to land the rocket. So the assessment is out, the portal has been built, and we have tweaked, shined, and polished everything to where it is very practical, very doable, so many people can now leverage it accordingly. So some humans are leveraging it in a coaching environment where maybe you're a leader and you feel that maybe there's a place for you to grow inside, but you don't know where to start. So this assessment measures your emotional literacy. It measures your emotional intelligence. It measures your emotional resilience. It measures your emotional agility. And it does combine it and norm it into an emotional regulation, kind of an overall assessment. The second thing it does is it measures your distress, your not so helpful stress. And then it makes a correlation to your quality of life, your well-being. Well, in 2026, this is becoming huge. Why? Because when you work in an organization, when you work in an agency, well-being sits in the middle, retention and recruitment sit on the outside. So if I can really obsess and be very mindful of the well-being, the culture, recruitment and retention can now be directly correlated. And I think when you make that connection, it does become economically sound to maybe pay attention to it. So again, I work in a world where you're like, I think I've got some answers. They're invisible, and man, oh man. So it is a kind of a challenging bet, but when you move from the emotion of certainty, there's not an ounce of doubt in my body that every human on the planet has emotions. And it is something that is a huge asset. When you go to work, I believe every role that goes to work requires emotions. I believe that every role that goes to work and comes into home requires you to have a set of emotional resources to pull from. And if your resources are anemic or they're no longer there, when you do an inventory, maybe some things have to be thrown out. Maybe some things have to be replenished. Maybe some things have to be purchased. So it's a nice inventory of what's invisible that creates the visible. So very, very satisfied and very full of anticipation of what's to come, because once you're able to uncover and discover some things, now we've got a chance to do what? Impact it.
Yeah. Well, for somebody who's in the business of something that's very visible, I find myself drawn more and more towards these businesses and things that revolve around the invisible. Like you're saying, I listen to a lot of podcasts talk about AI and, things that are being developed and what's coming in the future and what does the job market look like with all of this stuff. And I think the one thing that I've heard that several people have talked about is historically the people who are optimists tend to be the most successful. So there's all this doom and gloom around AI, but there's also a lot of positivity around what could happen in the best case scenario. And I say all that to say, one of the things that's been discussed is AI will give people the ability to branch out on their own in a new business. But one of the most important things that they need to have is creativity or the ability to show emotion, or all these, if you would consider it like soft skills, the things that you can't just put into a computer and it spits out an answer. Like all of these ways to communicate and how you show emotion and how you're emotionally regulated during that moment, a computer can't spit that out the same way that a human being does. And I think that your particular business and your message that you're trying to get across that's, near and dear to your heart, and one of the reasons why Dignity was even created in the first place, is all in this world of how important emotions are. And I think it will just become even more important as time goes on. So I've got all kinds of things that I want to talk about in the AI world, because I think you'll have some really cool insight on that.
Let's do it.
One of the things that's mentioned on your website is emotional agility. I thought that was a pretty interesting terminology, and I don't think I've ever heard of specifically emotional agility. It says the predominant contribution to your emotional regulation is emotional agility, not emotional intelligence. And I think that people talk about emotional intelligence a lot, and you and I kind of touched on that last time. But what exactly is emotional agility, and why is it so important?
Let's go back to what you said about 2 minutes ago, because my head's still there, and then we'll get into emotional agility. One of the things, so when I was in the military, you heard a term for the first time when I was in the military of PTSD, and most people know post-traumatic stress disorder. In World War I, they called it combat fatigue. In World War II, they called it shell shock. And now they call it PTS. That's all they call it. I mean, they didn't have the D on it. Post-traumatic stress. Some agencies say post-traumatic stress injury. Humans can raise their hand and say, I've got an injury. Some humans can't raise their hand and say, I can accept a disorder. One thing that's happening in the realm of emotions is the same exact thing. We're discovering new ways to describe it, to where it does start to it does start to get heard by the ears that need to hear it. So in our first podcast, you and I agreed, well, I stated it and you nodded. We said that Daniel Goleman in 1995 wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. And that was in 1995. I said I've been married for 30 years because I got married in 95. And I said, my gosh, we've evolved. And we both nodded our heads. And I said, we evolved into emotional literacy. Literacy is your and my ability to differentiate between the emotions of anger, disappointment, and frustration. Then we said emotional agility. Let's take a look at what emotional agility is. It's your ability to shift. Now, think of a running back as a football player. When they hit the defense, they have to shift. Their ability to go left and right. When you think of a gymnast, they have to be able to shift, their flexibility. So in hard challenges, it's good to stay emotionally agile. What does that mean? That means sometimes in the United States, we were being asked to have a conversation on taking Civil War statues down. Some were emotionally agile enough to have the conversation. Some were emotionally rigid, not going to have the conversation. One's not better than the other. I'm not saying one's better than the other. In this country, we were being asked to have a conversation on kneeling at the anthem. Some were emotionally agile. They could hear somebody else's point of view, the emotion of equanimity. Equanimity says, I can listen to Troy and I can hear his side without judgment. Some were like, nope, stubborn. We don't kneel at the anthem, and that's the end of the story. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong. Stubbornness protects tradition. Stubbornness protects policy. Stubbornness can get all your people home safe at night. So agility is when you bump into somebody and their number one go-to market is, I'm very direct. I'm a direct person. I know. But you're talking to business leaders, and that's going to require you to be a little diplomatic. I can't do that. Well, your inability to shift might cause you some relational challenges, some personal challenges, some positional challenges, but get ready, it could cost you some financial. Your inability to be diplomatic when you like to do what? Call balls and strikes. Marcel, policing is just black and white. I love it. And I hope it serves you in every situation of your career, in front of city council, in front of command staff, in front of mayor, in front of city manager, in front of superintendent, in front of president. Good luck. I bump into people and they're like, I don't trust anyone. I think that's awesome. You will never be able to collaborate. You will never connect. Your communication skills will be lapsed by those who can somewhat trust. So emotional agility says I can go into a room where everybody's crying and I can go to the next room where everybody's laughing. I'm agile enough. I'm agile enough to be able to see tattoos when my body doesn't have any and see both sides. In my head, in my sugar lizard reptilian brain, every story I tell myself makes all the sense in the world. Every story is in my head and it's 100% true until I do one thing, hear the other side. And once I hear the other side, I say, after further review. So emotional agility in my 58-year-old body allows me to do something pretty significant, change my mind. There's another emotion called regret. And regret is when you go, shouldn't have done it that way. Man, I should have made a U-turn a lot earlier and maybe said to that one human, that's not my best work. Or, I regret that behavior. That was not something that I was intending on having you feel. I don't really say much anymore, I'm sorry. People know when you've done something knucklehead that you're sorry. Most people do. I tend to lean more now on, I regret my behavior. So in closing, emotional agility is your ability to shift in the situation that allows you to do what? Stay in that situation.
Yeah.
Grow from that situation and maybe get out of that situation where it's actually better than it was when you entered it.
So here's one thing that I'm curious about, Marcel, that I actually wanted to ask, and you kind of brought it up. I think in today's world, everybody is just set on, well, I'm right. And like you said, not everybody, but a lot of people just don't even bother to see the other side. They're just like, this is what I think. Obviously, it's correct. And then it creates all of this tomato throwing at each other, just trying to say, well, this is what I think and I'm right and you're wrong. And they don't even take the time to understand people. Do you try to practice seeing the other side just to make sure that you understand where they're coming from, even if on face value, you don't agree with a belief system or a thought that they have, but you at least try to see where they're coming from and understand why they think that?
When I think about me, once you tell somebody you're an alcoholic, your ability to see lots of people's sides does become easier. Why? Because when you're an alcoholic or when you're a human, the best I'm ever going to be is human. And when I work on myself, I start to realize lots of people have tolerated me. Maybe I could tolerate them. When I do work on me, I start to own my insecurities so they don't own me. To the degree I can know and accept myself is to the degree I can know and accept you. When I stop listening to the other human, it's because I've stopped staying curious. It's because I've started becoming stubborn. And I notice a couple things. My curiosity goes down, so I stop asking questions. My agreeableness stops going down. My kindness starts going down. My eye contact starts going down. And these are things that are pulling me apart in the conversation. So I'm never advocating that Marcel goes into a conversation where he's stubborn, entitled, and very arrogant, because I think that's what allows me to shut you down as a human and clutch my pearls and say, I'm right. So again, I can't speak for the 8 billion people in the world. What I can speak to is when I start to find myself shutting other people out, it's because I've stopped being curious. I'm not standing in dignity, and it's not allowing me to extend that curiosity and dignity in the conversation, and therefore it's over.
Yeah. Well, I think that, we're a business podcast and we like to interview entrepreneurs, and your business helps all kinds of entrepreneurs because it talks about emotions, which everybody has to deal with within their business. And I think that a lot of, founders, CEOs, those who are in executive positions within their business, to me, they are more successful if they do have curiosity, if they do try to listen, if they don't come off as stubborn. And that's why I ask that question, is because I think that it's a good trait for really any of us to have, but definitely those who are in leadership in any form, whether that's business, policing, firefighters, the government, et cetera, to try to understand, to not just immediately assume that no further words need to be said because I've already made up in my mind based off what I've already experienced. And I think if we were all a little more curious, there would be a lot less, hate towards each other. And I think there would be a lot of respect coming up from these business leaders and the people that they're trying to lead, instead of just bossing people around and telling them what to do.
100%. And no one raises their hand in fourth grade and says, when I become a leader, I'm going to be a bully. Mm-hmm. No one raises their hand that way. No one raises their hand and says, you know what? I'm going to be rude. And that's how I'm going to go to market. I'm going to be rude. Here's what happens. When people will go, why are they so rude? Rude people are rude because somewhere in their life or career, they were rewarded for that rude behavior. Remember, I teach people how to treat me. And we talked about it in the first podcast. I came from a very people-pleasing background. When you're the middle child, okay, we've talked about that. I've had to learn that the emotion of dignity allows me to feel worthy, the worthiness of me. Number two, Marcel gets to decide what works for him, and Marcel gets to decide what doesn't work for him. What does that allow me to do? Set personal boundaries. And when I don't set personal boundaries, then the bully, then the rude human, they do what? They win. And I'm rewarding that bad behavior. So when I'm not able to, and I'm not really a big fan of call somebody out. You'll hear that in the world today. Hey, call them out. I'm a big fan of call them in. I'm a big fan of, we are 8 billion people who remind each other who we are when we forget. I know the bully came from a family. I don't know what happened. I know the bully came from a background. I'm not sure what happened. What I do know is that emotion that's driving them to bully does not excuse their behavior. It better explains their behavior. So if I can understand maybe the what and the how in their decision-making process, I think we all have a better potential and probability of being able to help them become more self-aware. Self-awareness is greater than ego. Self-awareness is the number one way to decrease somebody's ego. Ego can be very, very helpful. Ego can also be very hurtful. But self-awareness, the more I become self-aware, I've never bumped into somebody with high self-awareness and high ego. It's either high ego or low self-awareness, or high self-awareness, low ego. They never are able to ride in the car together. They're very inversely affected. So that's kind of how I would weigh in on being an executive who's more what? Curious. Being an executive who can stand in dignity and extend dignity. And what we learned was why we call it Dignity Inc. It's the number one emotion that allows your profession to remain a noble profession. And entitlement is the number one emotion that erodes the nobility of most professions. And both of them are emotions.
One thing that I'm curious about, and I ask myself this question all the time, because I think that with today being such an attention economy and, drawing attention to yourself, a lot of times is on one end of the spectrum or the other, and you have to be loud and aggressive about your position. To me, I think it creates what you're saying. It's like people, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, allow that to happen. And then there's this stigma of, well, if have a big ego and you're aggressive, then you're strong. And I think that the inverse to me, which is what I heard you say, is actually true. For someone who can take a second and then not just let it slide, I guess, but to approach it without having to approach their aggression with even more aggression and escalate a situation, if you can, stand firm and say, hey, the way you approach that, I don't agree with that. This is the way I think about things. I want to understand why all this happened, why you feel the way that you feel. I think it de-escalates the situation, and it also shows, in my opinion, a stronger person who can approach it that way. And I think that just that slight switch, if we could flip those two and view the people who are able to be strong but in kindness and not be so aggressive, would go such a long way in any area of life, not just business, but really any area of life.
If you go into most karate dojos across the world, there's going to be a sign in there somewhere that says, be soft to be strong, be vulnerable to be powerful. Now, in the United States, my opinion, I think vulnerability got a bad rap. I think it did. I think it happened somewhere where it was used as a verb. Somebody at a team leadership meeting locked the door and said, okay, we got to start trusting each other. Let's get vulnerable. I'll go first. I've not used the word vulnerability in my vernacular in the last, 3 to 5 years. I now start saying, you're asked to be guarded and unguarded. Can you do that? Can you be hard on the problem and respectful on the people? That's it. That's all I'm asking you to be. I give you every day the right to be hard on the problem. Be as hard as you want. And 5 words, be respectful on the people. 5 words, be hard on the problem. 1 word, and be respectful on the people. It doesn't take any skill at all for me to put my foot down and leave a footprint. Not one skill. Anybody can do that. My goodness gracious. And you and I talked about it the last time we were together. My favorite term that shuts me down in 9/10 of a second is when I hear somebody say this. Let me be brutally honest. There's not a worse phrase for me to hear as a human than that phrase. Why is that? Because I think you can be honest without being brutal. But today, we're just going to kick the snot out of each other. We're just going to be like a bunch of gorillas, and we're going to go at it. We're going to leave all the skills behind, and we're just going to hurt each other. I'm in. As long as you know what you're saying, I'm going to be brutally honest. Man, I can't think of a more condescending way for me to enter into a conversation. So when you think of what's being asked of us today, it is being hard on the problem. I think what everybody else is asking is, can you be respectful on the people?
One other thing that I think about a lot, and I can't even remember where I heard this, but I have the same feeling towards this word as you do towards the word brutal and brutally honest. And it's the word but. And I talked about this with my parents and my wife before, where you'll say something is maybe it's a compliment. It's like, Marcel, I think your shirt looks great today, but you look heavier than last time we talked. And it's like, when I say that, you're not going to remember that I complimented your shirt. You're going to remember what I said afterwards. And I told my parents something that I heard, which was, when you use the word but, it almost disregards the first half of the sentence. And to me, that's what the brutally honest thing does. It's like, when you approach it that way, you're being so hurtful, intentionally is kind of what it sounds like, to where it's not helpful. And if you're being honest and you care about somebody, then why would you not try to be helpful with also being honest?
You can take the word but out of your vocabulary in that situation and just pause. You can take the word yet out of your vocabulary and just pause. You can take the word however out of your vocabulary and just pause.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's words that count and there's sometimes that words that don't count at all. Like I had a discussion yesterday. Why is it that in the business world today, the word buy-in? Hey, we need Troy's buy-in on this decision. Hey, make sure we go get Annie in on the decision. We need her buy-in. I have never, ever saw the value in that word. Buy-in, in my opinion, comes when it's convenient. I'll do it when it's convenient. I'm bought in. And when we have budget. Now, when I got married 31 years ago, this coming April, the priest never asked me, are you bought in? No, the priest was kind of looking for commitment. And I think when we say the word buy-in, everybody goes, yeah, but I mean commitment. Well, then say commitment. Because sometimes in a relationship, commitment's nasty. Love comes in, makes it look nice and pretty. Love's not always there. It's like DOS. DOS is nasty. But Windows comes in, holy smokes. It's awesome. So what I'm asking you to do is kind of use the words that you really do mean. Don't give me superfluous words. You said a word. You said a term. Soft skills. Mm-hmm. Soft skills. Well, here's what I'm learning. Hug-a-thug skills, touchy-feely skills, hugging and crying skills, and soft skills. Those are all the way my business has been described. It's been described that way. It's the most fascinating thing. It's like, we went from shell shock to, combat fatigue to PTSD and then to PTSI and then to PTS. It's evolving. Here's what I'm saying in 2026. Interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills play a very big role in hard problems. So if you're in an argument with your 21 or 22-year-old daughter, I promise you hug-a-thug ain't going to cut it. Trying to get your 27-year-old son to maybe see something a little bigger or a little different, I promise you touchy-feely ain't going to cut it. Your interpersonal skills, your emotional skills, your intellectual skills, yeah, they're going to play a big role in what? That hard problem. So we can call it whatever you want. Agua and water, man, I'm still going to be drinking the same thing. It is the way it's perceived. It's all based on how it's going to be what? Received.
I think about that all the time whenever I'm explaining someone else's business to them and I'm using certain terminology. I'm like, am I using the correct terminology? Am I using old terminology? Am I phrasing something in a way that's going to be offensive to them? Because like you said, ultimately it does to an extent. It does matter to an extent what my intentions are in asking a question or making a statement towards their business. But most of it is ultimately how it's received. And my intentions can help with how it's received. But also, I think that trying to understand somebody's business and trying to, as you say all the time, reserve the right to be better, and you hinted at it at the beginning of the podcast, is really important, and not to just say, I don't need to learn any further and get any smarter.
I was just at lunch before I came here, and that's why I walked in with the emotion of guilt because I was late. And when you go against your own value system that says Marcel's never really late, you feel guilt. At lunch, I was going to lunch with a buddy of mine who had a stroke. During our conversation, I asked the question what it's like to meet other stroke victims. And he put his hand on mine, and he said, hey, stroke recovery patient. Troy, that wasn't yesterday. That was today. That was 2 hours ago. My vocabulary is there, and yet it may not be so current, may not be so correct, and it may not be so complete. One thing that I'm helping others maybe see as an alcoholic, you'll hear a term, you'll hear a phrase, well, they haven't hit rock bottom yet. Well, okay. You don't have to hit that rock bottom. Actually, today can be your rock bottom. You just got to put the shovel down, Marcel, and stop digging. So there are phrases we've heard that maybe when they first came out were helpful. And as people have evolved and more people have had experiences, they're sitting there saying, that's not the way I feel. You'll hear the term an alcoholic. And I say, I'm a sober alcoholic. And people are like, I don't know what that means. Well, there's a drunk alcoholic and there's a sober alcoholic. They're both hard. I'm choosing the road of sober alcoholic. So again, people would say that's semantics. And I would say, no, that's the way I describe myself. That's the terms that fall and allow me to listen to you.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and I don't even know how familiar you are with this terminology in itself, but I think it kind of ties into what you're saying, where I think certain things are born in an attempt to help, and they may not always be helpful, and they may be way more hurtful. And to be honest with you, it's kind of something that fights my belief system versus trying to learn and understand something. And it's this whole term called the Manosphere. And I don't know if you've heard this at all, but let me explain it to you. It's called red pill, or it refers kind of to the Matrix, the movie, and it's being this ultra alpha man that you don't need to consider other people's emotions. You know, it's all about you. It's all about building yourself, et cetera, et cetera. And it was actually a documentary that came out this week on it. And I'm watching this, which is like part of me is like, man, should I have even watched it? It was so aggressive. But it's someone that goes in and tries to understand these men that fall into this place where they just totally disregard pretty much anybody who's not serving them. Mm. And I think that part of it was born out of this, like, trying to hate on men and trying to stand up for themselves, but it went way too far. Mm. And I think with that and with other, like, movements, and even with, like, this term gets thrown around a lot with, oh, well, the younger generation's soft and they don't know how to work hard, and et cetera, et cetera. I think all of these things are born because people don't bother to try to understand each other. And I think that that's one of the big things that I wanted to ask today is, do you think that, what are your thoughts on any of those terms and any of those movements of people just trying to stand up for themselves, but they just go way too far, I guess?
Mm. You called it the Manosphere?
It's called the Manosphere.
Okay.
You'll have to look it up when you get
I
home, because it is.
Ooh, I'm always learning new things with you, Troy. I think the first thing that popped into my head was people do what they do because to them it makes sense. It doesn't have to make sense to me. I don't know why. I don't know what they're doing. But to them, as a human, that persona makes sense to them. I think the second thing that comes up for me, you know, when you talk about, you'll hear somebody say this. I've said it before. The younger generation doesn't work as hard as I do. Okay, so let's talk about that. There's many different things, and one term that we have heard is they're called generational differences. Now, today, I'm not a big fan of really thinking there really are generational differences. I would call them preferences, your preferences. What's a preference? Well, there's some humans who like to work really, really hard. That's me. I love working hard. I love working all the time. And then I start to think, look how awesome I am. This is where I get my identity. This is where I get my worthiness. Shouldn't everybody behave the way Marcel does? And then I look around the world and they're like, no. What's it like for you, Marcel, to be on the weekend? What's it like for you, Marcel, to go on vacation? So I think it's real easy for those who do something naturally, for those who do something of preference, for those who do something that's very, very I have a tendency towards. it's interesting that I grew up, we talked about it on podcast 1, that I grew up with, and I still have it today, with a lot of energy. Lots of energy. And people would call me an extrovert. Well, it is interesting that the extrovert introvert has always been around. And sometimes they point fingers at each other. Like the introvert would say to me, and I'm not saying it's all, but they might say, hey, can you dial that back just a little bit, right? And I'm looking over at the introvert side, and I'm like, hey, can't you dial that up a little bit? So think about this. Think about the two opposites. Some humans I work with, they consume all kinds of information. They read every email, they read every paragraph, they read every attachment. I delete almost everything. I'm like, I have no really need for information. Isn't that awesome? Shouldn't everybody be like me? And what's it like to report to Marcel when you have a high need for information and Marcel doesn't really even know what's going on? So when we say the younger generation is, I want to do a quick spot check on me and make sure it's not me. And 100% of the time, I'm pointing the finger out. It's because me, Marcel, has 3 emotions: entitlement, stubbornness, and arrogance. What gives me the right to point my finger? The emotion of entitlement. I'm 58 years old. I've been in the business world for 30 years. I. What's the other emotion? Stubbornness. I'm not changing my belief system. My belief system is this. This is the way I was raised. And then what's the third one? Arrogance. My God, can't you see how amazing I am? And when I make my cocktail of arrogance, entitlement, and stubbornness, it allows me to take all of my fingers and point them out and say knucklehead things like, wow, that younger, those people. It's interesting how I sell myself the idea that my story in my one head is 100% correct. So I don't know how the other 8 billion people do it. What I know is when I start to feel a little entitled, a little stubborn, and a lot arrogant, maybe even hubris where I'm above the law and I move with impunity, I start to get that little bit of a twitch. Like, let me tell other people how to behave. Let me tell other people how they should be thinking and believing and making decisions. Like who? Like me. So again, it's a gut check from me. The Manosphere, don't know anything about it. What I do know is to them, it makes sense. For them on that day doing these things, it makes sense to them. And, they reserve the right to be smarter tomorrow too.
I sure hope so. So would you then say that people have the right to express how they feel based off, their experiences, who they are as a person, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that you could say it's a universal truth that if what you're feeling, the way you're expressing yourself, the way you come across, if it is hurting someone, then I think we could agree that this is not helpful at all. And I think that that's where some of these things stem to eventually. And you'll definitely have to let me know after you read through some of this stuff, is some people go so far that it just hurts people. Mm-hmm. And if your expressions and emotions are hurting people, and I think it would be easy to say that this is not just who you are versus who I am. This is just wrong.
What I would say is you have every right to be angry. Mm-hmm. You have no right to be cruel. Mm-hmm. So there are many rights that we all have. Like I have the right to freedom of speech. Guess what? I don't have the right to make you listen. So I got all the rights in the world, and yet there's very few that, actually get people to listen. So you're right. Of course, we would never advocate hurting others. We are saying 2 words: emotionally regulated. Emotionally regulated. So this just happened this month, and the emotion I'm in most of this week has been vexation. When you're vexed, it is it's a deep frustration tied in with a lot of uncertainty, tied in with a lot of disappointment, tied in with maybe even a tinge of anger. When you're vexed, you're worried about something and you need other people to help you. In the state of Texas this month, we had a police chief take their life by suicide this month in Texas. When you read about this human and their wonderful past, they were positioned as a mental wellness expert. Okay. When you walk into a police department, fire department, organization, they do have a mental wellness process, and they'll all have it. To me, mental wellness equals Troy and Marcel going to the dentist twice a year to get their teeth cleaned. You and I would never call that a dental program. We would never call that dental hygiene. Going twice a year to your dentist to get your teeth cleaned, not dental hygiene. I don't even know if you call it dental prevention, cavity prevention. One thing that we're thinking about is, how about emotional wellness and mental wellness? See, now I'm brushing my teeth and I'm flossing, emotional wellness, and I'm linking it with mental wellness. I'm going to the dentist twice a year. I think there has to be a proactive approach to these humans who want to be extra alpha males. I mean, as an airborne ranger, I was taught that. That is something that is instilled in you. When I told my Mom, I'm an alcoholic. I actually told my parents, and my dad goes, well, that makes sense. And then my mom's like, but you're an airborne ranger. That's willpower, Marcel. You should be able to drink like a normal human being. I'm like, well, this conversation's over. Mom, I'm powerless. Even as an airborne ranger, even with all this training, it still broke me. And here's what I learned. When I was 18, I learned a phrase, work hard, play hard. And I embodied it. And it served me at 18, it served me at 28, and it broke me at 50. There are certain mindsets that I think serve humans that they outgrow. And that's why being intellectually sound is what most people are hired for. Remember, when I went to high school in Houston, 1981 to 1985, my whole identity, my whole self-worth was 3 words: GPA, class rank, SAT score. That's it. That was your A game. Hey, what was your SAT score? You were known by your SAT score. Hey, what's your class rank? That's how you were valued. Hey, what's your GPA class? So when you don't have a standardized brain, I told you this in podcast 1, you don't do well on standardized tests. So when I went home and told my older brother, who I think made a 50 on the SAT, I said, I made a 780. He goes, which section? I was like, well, that was combined. So I really learned that intellect is rewarded. When I went to Catholic school, smart kids raised the flag. Smart kids clacked the erasers. Smart kids took the notes to the principal. And I was taught at a very young age this one idea: don't look stupid. Well, guess what? If I held on to that story, man, all I would be thinking about my whole life is who hurt me. So if we can't forgive, then all we're forced to do now is go through life thinking, I've been hurt. So when we met the first time, we talked about trauma. And when you go through traumatic experiences, and everybody who's listening to this has had traumatic experiences, we have 2 choices: get better or get bitter. And when you don't do the work, then guess what? I have one choice: get bitter. And that's when we start doing, I won't talk about they. That's when Marcel starts pointing his fingers, right? Marcel is a little bitter, a little grumpy pants. Dan Newby, one of his nieces asked him if he was pre-grumpy. He's not grumpy. Are you pre-grumpy? And I love that. I love it because it's a perfect definition that doesn't get your porcupine quills up. So I'm learning that when I'm a little bit bitter, it does allow me to point my finger.
One of the most controversial statements I've probably heard that really got me to thinking over the last year or so is I heard someone say that therapy is not for everyone. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that it's just kind of like this unsaid thing that everybody just assumes that if you have an issue, then you just need to go to therapy about it. Do you think that therapy is helpful for everyone, or there's certain people that maybe that's not the right approach to help them to, like you said, get better instead of getting bitter?
So I work with alcoholics all the time, and some are what we would call court appointed, and they walk into my program of recovery and they have a white piece of paper, and it's given to them by their probation officer, and they have to sign that they were there, and you know in your heart of hearts that they may not be there to really get sober. Okay, so that's one thing. I think what you're asking me is it good for everyone? And here would be my 3 criteria. I would say if you have a broken arm, getting it fixed, it's for everyone. Got a broken leg, want to get it fixed, it's good for everyone. I do believe if you have a broken brain, a broken heart, it's good. It's good, but we have to be 3 things. Honest. We have to be open, and we have to be willing. Those would be the 3 criteria, because when I meet with alcoholics, they're willing to get sober. They're very open to getting sober, but they ain't honest. Then I meet some people, they're honest about getting sober. They're open about getting sober, but they ain't willing. They come kicking and screaming. So I do think it's a combination of honest, open, and willing. And if you're honest in this session, if you're open in this session, and if you're willing, we talked about it the first time, willing to do the work. If those 3 things kind of come in, notice how they spell how. How does Marcel get better? He's honest, he's open, and he's willing. If you're honest and open but not willing, I can't help you. If you're willing and honest but not open, I can't help you. I need all 3. You need to be honest to do what? Help yourself. So you can be honest with other humans. If I can't be honest with me, how could I possibly be honest with my spouse of 30 years? Open. One thing that I've really harnessed is Marcel has to remain teachable, to remain humble. The day I stop being teachable is the day I start thinking, I'm the man. I become my own solution. No, look where all my thinking got me. It got me at a seat in a program of recovery. So I need something bigger than me, and I got to be honest. I got to be open, and I got to be willing. So to answer your question, yes, I think therapy. But therapy is different from coaching. And coaching is different from mentorship, and mentorship is different from friendship, and friendship's different from consulting. There's all different levels of being able to get what? Some advice, some help. Some people call what I do therapy, and it's not therapy at all. It's not therapy at all. It's coaching. It's advising. And so there has to be a little bit of clarification too on what people say is therapy. Because once they see me coming, sometimes they're like, oh man, are you kidding me? And I have to clarify. I'm here to help the helpers. That's what I'm here to do. Who helps the helpers?
Yeah, well, I think that that's kind of the point that this person was trying to make. And, you know, even in like the alcohol stuff or the policing stuff or anything of that nature, I think that people just say, oh, well, you have trauma. You need to go to traditional therapy. So then it's like, come sit down in this room. Okay, I'm your therapist. I'm going to ask you my 25 standardized questions that I ask everybody because that's what therapy is. And I think that's the point, is that not everybody fits into the same box, and that different approaches work well for different people. Mm-hmm. And even some of the examples you gave with, you know, therapy, coaching, friendship, mentoring, all of those things, you can't just stick somebody into a box. And it goes back to the exact same thing we keep saying, which is just trying to understand somebody and to learn how to help them better, or how to, help understand who they are as a person.
Well, let's go there. Because the assessment that we built, there are assessments out there that only have 16 boxes as answers. So you take the entire assessment and you're one of 16 boxes and it gives you 4 letters. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, Troy, you have a dynamic personality, but we've only got 16 boxes and we're going to jam you in one, and you're going to get 4 letters from it. And that was 1940, right? And IBM got a hold of this assessment, and it was called the liquidation of the human personality. In 1956, another assessment came out, and it has 4 quadrants, and it says you're a high D, you're a high I. And you're like, oh my God, I'm a high I. And it's like, well, we're looking for high Ds. Sorry, man. Maybe you can go next door. So now they're starting to type you. So the first assessment boxed you. The second assessment typed you. Hey, look at Troy. He's a type I. He's a high D, which gave everybody the right to what? Just blow people right over. I'm a driver. I'm a da-da-da. Okay, well, it became more of a shield than it did something that was helpful. Today, there's an assessment out there, and it says, hey, I'm a 1-2. Hey, I'm a 3-4. And now it starts to what? So there's one that boxes. There's one that labels. Now there's one that starts to box, label, box type. Now it's going to label you. I'm a 1-2, or it gives you another assessment. Hey, I'm high in woo. I'm like, what's woo? Oh, that's winning others over. So now I've labeled you as woo. And I've got 3 kids, and I don't want one of them to be boxed. I don't want one of them to be typed, and I don't want one of them to be labeled. And I'm not saying those assessments that do that are incorrect. What I am saying is, goes back to what you said. The second you put me in a box, the second you give me a type, the second you give me a number, now I can shortcut and just cut everything out. Troy's just a 2. Troy's an 8. On this assessment, he's an 8. Well, what the heck does that tell me? It's not a shortcut to you. It's an excuse for me not to be no longer curious about anything else that you could possibly do. Now I'm going to put it on my emails. I'm going to put it on my office. Hey, when you walk in, you treat me like a 1-2. No, I don't want that. So why can't we have an assessment that's just as a platform for one thing, a conversation? So there's a lot, I think, you're bringing up a really good point. There's a lot of clarification of what is therapy, clarification of what is mentorship, clarification of what is somebody who can do somewhat counseling, clarification of what is a consultant, clarification of what is coaching, what is a teacher, what's a facilitator, what's an instructor. They're all different. No, they're not. Not in my head. They're all just one thing. Well, then we lose. So we got to do some clarification on our side to be better positioned and perceived, I think, on the other side.
The last thing that I definitely wanted to cover, because I wanted to get your thoughts on it, that's a different topic, is going back to the AI thing. And I hear people talk about all the time how, at least from what I hear, it seems to be increasing. People are interacting less and less with other people, and they're interacting more and more with AI. And they're starting to develop friendships with these AI bots that are being created online because they're getting better at acting like a human. And what I hear other people say is that it's going to create this issue because, well, it already has, and there's been several cases of really sad stories of people that have just their entire life is interacting with this AI that's online. And that the human interaction and what you and I have is irreplaceable. A robot will never be able to replace that, and that we as humans need that to survive. It's something that is just as important for our survival because of how we're built. The fact that AI is getting smarter, the fact that all of these companies are getting paid billions of dollars to create these things that could drive people to interact less with each other because it's emotionally easier to not have to deal with somebody else's emotions. How does that make you feel? Does it make you curious? Does it make you scared? What does that whole situation do for you?
Well, it definitely makes me curious. I'm not so fussed on scared. You know, when I grew up, somebody came out with this thing called the microwave. And they said, oh, my goodness gracious, it's going to replace every oven in the world. This thing right here, this microwave, whew. And guess what I have in my house? I have both. And I've heard people have this conversation with me. So I'll say, yes, I'm an airborne ranger. And they're like, where did you scroll? Where did you scroll? That means what ranger battalion were you in? And there is a sense that one Ranger battalion's better than the other. And you know what they're doing. They're trying to become more elite. In this conversation, listen to police. How many times you pulled your weapon? None. Oh. So we're trying to get to where we are so unique that we become what? Better. And I feel I've never experienced what it's like to be that human who relies on AI. I'm learning what neurodivergence is like. I'm learning that when you wake up and you are unregulated from the time you open your eyes to the time you go to sleep, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sound. I have no concept of what that means. I have no idea what it's like to go to school completely unregulated. For you and me, when we see somebody with cut marks on their arms, we're like, that's gotta hurt. Do you realize, Marcel, the amount of pain somebody has to be in an unregulated way emotionally, to where when they would cut themselves, physically cut themselves with a razor blade, that the amount of endorphins actually feels better than the emotional feelings they're feeling right now? I have no concept of what that's like. To me, I would be sobbing if I did that. It would hurt so much. And yet there's different levels of what that is. And I'm discovering that I don't know what it's like to be unregulated. I don't know what it's like to have light sensitivity. I don't know what it's like to have to be going to school and learn the Pythagorean theorem, and I'm worried about if I'm not going to have a home when I go home to anymore. These are things that I can't possibly fathom. So am I curious? Sure. Am I concerned? Well, I don't know. I haven't seen anything that I'm sitting here saying, wow, that's really crazy, and yet the mind can run wild. So I'm going to keep myself saying, here's another thing. When we start leaning over into things that are new or maybe unknown, sure, that can cause me a little bit of uncertainty. What I do know is trying to compare doesn't usually allow me to come out equal. I'm either going to come out above or I'm going to come out below. And when I have these conversations of, have you done this, or have you done this, or I can't believe they're doing this, I'm not really familiar with all of it, you know? And all I know is that if I drowned at 7 feet in water and you drowned at 14 feet in water, we are both dead. And so to compare the level of water in which we drowned is not really needed and necessary. So I gotta have to think it through that way in a different lens of, is it concern or is it curiosity? So there's an emotion called ambivalent, which means I could probably go on either side.
I think I feel that emotion a lot, and it's specifically in this area because, like you said, and like I alleviated to earlier in our conversation here, is the optimistic side of me sees it as the microwave oven scenario, where you said, you know, that we have both, and I see AI as being a useful tool that also helps us to continue to progress and be better as people. And then the pessimistic side of me sees it as, is this something that's going to be emotionally damaging to a point where it's a real problem? And that's where my curiosity kicks in, because it's, who knows, and we'll see. And I think that as things continue to develop, it'll be a really interesting conversation that you and I can continue to have, you know, over the years to see.
I look forward to it. I do want to back up maybe a half hour in this conversation.
Yep.
You leverage the word attention, someone's attention. And in 2026, I kind of think our attention is a commodity, and everything is fighting for our attention. And I think when we first started out with social media, that was getting everybody's attention. And now different social media platforms have evolved. Some of the youth have left the older platforms, and some of the olders have joined the later platforms, and they're like, doggone it, you know, so stop checking on me, grandma. And I think this, with the new AI, it's so new, and it's so big, and it's so different, but it does ask for everyone's attention. So it's still evolving.
Yeah. I think that it will be an interesting story, just like the social media story has been. I heard someone say this week, social media was built to connect us, and it's done the inverse, where people are so busy scrolling that go to a restaurant, everybody's scrolling on their phone. They're not even paying attention to the people that they're sitting down with. And it's ironic that it was built to connect, and it seems it's done the opposite.
I agree. I walked into a coffee shop. This is probably 2 years ago, and it says, "Welcome to our coffee shop. Let's not talk to everybody who's not in the coffee shop." And it was such a profound thing to look around. There wasn't a lot of talking, and it was to everybody who wasn't in the coffee shop. So I agree.
Well, let's wrap up here with a couple fun things. Last time I asked you what your favorite emotion was, and you said ebullience, I think is how that's said.
That's right.
Yeah. What is maybe another favorite emotion, or one that you're experiencing or that's new recently that you feel like you're in?
Well, there's an emotion that is enthusiasm. And the story that comes with the emotion of enthusiasm is I'm part of something that's bigger than me. And so Dignity Inc. is growing, and it's growing in ways that I've never thought were even possible. The platform that we have built, the community that we are growing, they're starting to communicate with each other and build things that we see not even on our brightest day of being able to think through. So enthusiasm, I'm part of a group that's bigger than me. So I'm waking up with lots of enthusiasm, lots of ebullience. And I think another one that's really been really getting me lately is the vexation. There are things happening that I can't believe are happening. It's almost like incredulity. Doggone it. Another human took their life. Doggone it. I can't believe this is happening. So there's a lot of emotions that are pulling me forward, and there's other emotions that are causing me to look inward, saying, how can we get this message out?
Yeah. For those listening, lastly, for them to contact you, who is it that you're trying to reach? What are some of these tools that we've kind of talked about a little bit that you think would be helpful? Just kind of leave the audience with those.
We think emotional regulation is an antidote to. So if you are in a leadership role, the reason you would bring Dignity Inc. in to your organization is we are an antidote to. Emotional regulation is an antidote to directors not having tough conversations. Doesn't every director know there's a book called Crucial Conversations? Doesn't every director know that there's the internet that teaches people how to have fierce conversations, tough conversations? There's not one director I've ever met that didn't understand the science behind having a tough conversation. And yet you ask them, you going to go have it? Nope, not going to go have it. And it's an emotion. Emotional regulation is an antidote to directors not delegating their work. They want to keep it all to themselves. Nope. I don't trust anyone. I don't want to get in trouble because you knuckleheads don't know how to do it as perfectly as me. It's not intellectually based. It's what? It's emotionally based. Emotional regulation is an antidote to being able to work with difficult people. Many times when people come to me and say, I have a hard time working with this person, you know what we learn? They lack the interpersonal skills to do it themselves. So what's it easy to do? Blame them. When you don't do the work as a director, when you don't do the direct work as a supervisor, my goodness gracious, I'm paying you a base salary. I'm not paying you a base salary to be who you are. I'm actually paying you a base salary to be a little better than who you are. Emotional regulation is an antidote to, think about police. It's an antidote to sexual misconduct. It's an antidote to alcohol abuse. It's an antidote to suicide. It's an antidote to lying. It's an antidote to insubordination. Think about on fire. It's an antidote to bullying. It's an antidote to harassment. It's an antidote to toxic environments? Can it also be very, very helpful and pull teams together? Heck yeah. So emotions pull a team together or it pulls a team apart. And they're, like we talked about on the first one, they're both hard. So anything that has to do with, so we're working with many cities who have a big culture that they're trying to build. Well, anytime you put together a culture, you ought to link it to what? The emotions needed to sustain it and turn it into a legacy culture. You can have a wonderful acronym that most cultures live by. Well, it's this and this, it's RISE, it's together, and it's got different, standards and behaviors, which is awesome. And yet there's no emotions to put it into actual what? Effect. I said it last time when we were together. Love the idea you got to find your why by Simon Sinek. I also said you got to find your backbone. You got to find the emotion that'll let you live your why. So knowing your why, that's awesome. Can't wait to know my why. Are you living it? Nope. It's too hard. So I think that would be one way to look at Dignity Inc. as an emotional regulation resource. Anything that is inside your organization that needs to be dialed up or maybe dialed back, grown, we can help.
Awesome. So I guess that'd be businesses, schools, cities, departments, pretty much anybody that has emotions that's a larger organization or a smaller organization would be a good fit for you guys.
You're exactly right. Yeah, if you got a big thimble and you fill it with water and you got a small thimble and you fill it with water, they're both full. So big agencies and small agencies, they're both important. Big city, small city, big company, small company, they're both important. Why? Because humans show up. And humans show up with emotions underneath that title, underneath that rank. We just don't describe it that way.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
that's why I started with, emotional, all titles and ranks require emotions, require emotional resources. We can be helpful in that department.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marcel. Once again, it's been awesome.
Once again, thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.